Charleston County is now under a state of emergency. Leave as soon as possible.
There will be more flooding as a result of this storm than any Charlestonian has ever experienced. It will boggle the mind.
35 years since Hurricane Hugo.
Probably 100% damage out here. The devastation here is just unbelievable.
35 years of growth and development. And 35 years of a population boom. From then,
just to the southeast of the Charleston area, there's the eye of the storm, very, very potent storm.
To now, Storm Team 2 is preparing you and your family for a supercharged 2024 hurricane season by going back to basics.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for our 2024 hurricane season special, Back to Basics. I'm Storm Team 2 Chief Meteorologist Rob Fowler, joined by the rest of Storm Team 2, meteorologists Josh Marthers, Jed Kristoff, and Grace Lau. It's a beautiful day here in the Low Country, but with hurricane season underway, we know how quickly that can change.
Over the next half hour, Storm Team 2 will take you back to basics, telling you everything you need to know to be prepared for what we think is going to be a supercharged hurricane season.
It has been decades since the Low Country last saw a major hurricane strike, and in that time, we've seen a population boom and sprawling development.
From our beautiful beaches to our rich history, people are drawn to our area, but many may not be familiar with the risk our beautiful coastline brings.
Hugo, Matthew, Florence, Dorian, and Ian are just a few of the hurricanes that have shaped the Low Country. We've seen less severe storms in recent years, making us overdue for the next major storm. And that brings us to 2024. The early season forecasts are off the charts.
Supercharged, daunting, extremely active, out-of-bounds anomaly. These are all terms being thrown around for hurricane season 2024. It's no doubt making many nervous and a bit uneasy. But it's part of living here along the coast, where we have no barriers to block us from possible storms born in warm waters.
Everybody here in South Carolina coast needs to be ready regardless of what any seasonal forecast says. You've got all the hazards in play here, from storm surge, rainfall, flooding, tornadoes, surf and rip currents, the whole bang, and all including the wind.
Dr. Brennan would know. As director of the National Hurricane Center, he's responsible for leading a team of experienced tropical meteorologists who forecast storms which can be very unpredictable and fickle. This job can be especially difficult when dealing with areas which haven't seen any major activity in quite a while. Complacency may creep in, along with population explosion along the coast. The lure of water is great. We're a perfect example of this. It's been more than 3 decades since Hurricane Hugo.
More than a generation without a major hurricane landfall here. So you've got, people that have grown up here their whole lives. They may not have experienced anything like that. But you also have people moving here from areas that aren't hurricane prone at all, may not understand what those risks and those hazards are.
We all have to remember it doesn't take a major hurricane to cause major impacts. We know all too well it doesn't even take a hurricane. A slow-moving tropical depression or tropical storm just off of our coast can create major problems, especially when it comes to rain and storm surge. One of the hardest parts of the job is to relay the season forecast message with the right tone and expertise.
It's a fine line between, getting people aware of the season, but not overhyping it to the point where people just throw up their hands and say, wow, it's going to be such a busy year. Why do I even need to prepare? So we have to keep people calm. We've had busy hurricane seasons before. We're going to have busy hurricane seasons again.
This is where Dr. Brennan says it's important to stay calm and prepare. We know we can't stop these storms, but forecasting them is becoming more precise because of added updated technology and our first line of defense, the hurricane hunters. The importance of these planes and the men and women who fly them into storms can't be ignored.
So they make those forecasts 10 to 20% better for the track and the intensity of the storm. That can be the difference between making a decision to evacuate a major metropolitan area or not. So we try to get these aircraft in the storm as early as possible and as often as possible.
We are hoping a decision like that will not happen for us this year, but if it does, being ready just in case will help alleviate some of the stress and anxiety, which will no doubt be a part of the equation.
There is no doubt more and more people are moving to the Low Country. That means a lot of new faces from different parts of the country.
You're absolutely right, Rob, and most of them have never experienced a hurricane or know what to do when one threatens. This year, the South Carolina Emergency Management Division has drawn new hurricane evacuation zones. The Lowcountry, a popular tourist destination, now turned into a home for many.
Huntersville, North Carolina.
We are both from Annapolis, Maryland.
With several new residents not knowing what to do when evacuation is necessary.
Do you guys know your hurricane evacuation zone here?
No, I don't.
I do not know. I do not know.
Whether you've lived here your whole life or you're new to the Lowcountry, brand new evacuation zones have been updated for the 2024 hurricane season.
South Carolina is changing every day. New people are moving in, our communities are growing, and we have to take into account these changes. Specifically, with our hurricane evacuation zones, when it's time to evacuate from a dangerous hurricane that has life-threatening storm surge, we have to ask South Carolinians to move out of harm's way when those waters will come on shore.
Knowing the vulnerabilities of where you live ahead of time is key.
Folks may be very comfortable knowing their zone from previous iterations or previous storm seasons, but now changes have occurred. We need everyone to take time, if you're in a coastal community, to know your zone.
The best time to prepare is now, before it's too late. Make sure you know your zone for the 2024 hurricane season. These are the newly drawn zones for the 2024 hurricane season, listed from A to F.
And some recent data and modeling technique advancements that have taken place, they have informed our division and our local authorities about how and where we need to evacuate.
When a hurricane threatens, evacuation routes are predetermined. State and local authorities will announce evacuations by these designated zones. You and your family would be asked to evacuate to protect you from life-threatening wind, storm surge, and flooding.
It's specifically the water that we'll be asking folks to evacuate for.
So make sure you know your zones. Scan the QR code on your screen that will directly link you to our website, that's counton2.com, that will have the newly updated zones and evacuation routes.
Back to basics. When evacuation is necessary, make sure you have your hurricane disaster supply kit ready now. Here is what you should have: a NOAA weather radio, important documents, batteries, non-perishable food items, and water, and you could carry cash as well. If you have any pets, do not forget to include them in your plans for the 2024 hurricane season.
Coming up, from the coast to our inland areas, hurricane impacts can affect everyone in the Lowcountry.
Welcome back to our hurricane special, Back to Basics. With the 2024 season expected to be a very active one, extreme rainfall associated with hurricanes often poses a threat well away from where the eye makes landfall and can persist for days as the storm moves inland. Extreme rainfall associated with hurricanes often poses a threat well away from where the eye makes landfall and can persist for days as the storm moves inland.
Over the last decade, extreme rainfall and flooding has been the deadliest hazard of these storms, and we've seen it. With these extreme rainfall rates, as these storms could be far away, and you still have this extreme rainfall with this really moist atmosphere.
Director of the Weather Prediction Center, Dave Novak, is referring to storms like Joaquin, Matthew, Florence, all names associated with tremendous amounts of rain in the Carolinas. Rain amounts being measured in feet, not inches in some cases. These storms produce significant damage and even fatalities well away from their centers. Joaquin being the best example of this, passing hundreds of miles offshore of the Carolinas, but its moisture was pulled right into the Lowcountry thanks to a totally different non-tropical storm to our west.
But what we do know, the atmosphere is getting more moist. Anytime that happens, you're going to have more and more rain. And in fact, what we're seeing is the heaviest rain is getting heavier. So, I like to certainly just know and warn folks that, these heavy rainfall events, they're not going to stop.
Data from Charleston International Airport gathered by Climate Central shows this trend over the last couple of decades. Higher rainfall rates increase the likelihood of extreme rainfall events and inland flooding from tropical cyclones.
So I am optimistic that we are going to, I'm more than optimistic, I'm confident we're going to meet the challenge of predicting these extreme rainfall events. And you and your family need to be prepared for these kind of events as they become more frequent.
With rapidly evolving technology, we are able to give longer lead times and more confidently highlight areas of greatest concern. This, combined with increasing awareness of the threat from extreme tropical rainfall events, property and lives will be more protected. As impacts from storms are felt inland, some of the greatest areas of concern lie within the first few miles of the coast.
And these also tend to be some of the most highly populated areas. It's easy to see why, but keep in mind, life on the water doesn't come without its risks.
Living in the Lowcountry, we are blessed with incredible beaches and waterways. Some of the most beautiful landscapes in the country can be found here, and it is easy to get fully immersed in the ocean. Surfing is a great example of this, and oftentimes peaceful and graceful art. But for those who call the Lowcountry home, they know that while the ocean can provide, it can also take away. And unfortunately, Charleston is particularly at risk.
When it comes to Charleston, they're probably one of the more vulnerable areas.
Cody Fritz, a storm surge specialist at the National Hurricane Center, explains that there is a reason why our beautiful coastline is especially susceptible to storm surge.
It's very shallow within the region near the shore, and that lends itself to being very vulnerable to storm surge overall. You also have a very low-lying coastline, and that also lends for that water to extend far inland as a result of those winds pushing that water onshore.
This is why it is critical to monitor forecasts during hurricane season. But what exactly is storm surge, after all?
Storm surge is just that abnormal rise in the overall water as a result of hurricane force winds or tropical storm force winds pushing water over ground that would otherwise be dry.
Last year, the Lowcountry had to deal with both Tropical Storm Idalia in August and a nor'easter in December. The December storm produced the 4th highest crest, and Idalia produced the 6th highest crest downtown on record. This just goes to show how exposed the Lowcountry truly is. Now imagine if a major hurricane ever made landfall farther south of downtown Charleston. In this hypothetical situation, water would be forced directly into the Charleston harbor due to significant onshore winds. This Climate Central video shows us what that could look like, the worst case scenario. Although statistically unlikely, you can never rule it out, illustrating the importance to have a plan and to monitor our forecasts. Even if a storm stays well offshore of the South Carolina coast, it can still be a threat. Large waves, dangerous rip currents, and increase in hazardous marine life and beach erosion can all be prevalent along our beaches. In fact, about 100 people die each year in rip currents, so it's always a good idea to review the facts. You should know before you go. Check the Storm Team 2 forecast before planning a trip to the beach, and it's always a good idea to swim near a lifeguard. If you find yourself being pulled away from the beach in a rip current, remember, don't panic. Turn, face the beach, wave your hands so somebody knows you are in trouble, and do not fight the rip by going straight back to shore. Instead, swim parallel to the coast to escape the rip current, and then you may return safely back to the beach.
Remembering these points could help save a life and keep you prepared for whatever the ocean may throw your way.
Back to basics. Make sure you have ways to stay up to date during a tropical system. Have the Storm Team 2 app downloaded for all of your hurricane information. Create a communication plan with your family members and friends so that everyone is informed on the forecast and evacuation plan when a hurricane threatens.
From the sky to the screen. Coming up, Storm Team 2 takes you inside the Hurricane Hunter aircraft and how the data collected enhances the forecast.
The 2024 hurricane season is predicted to be a highly active season, and it's a nationwide effort to keep you up to date on the latest forecast if a hurricane threatens. And it all starts in the sky.
Information in from the hurricane hunters right now that this very well may be a Category 4 hurricane based off some estimates right now from their latest pass through the storm.
There goes the signs. There goes the beds. Holy cow.
The absolute worst flight I've been on was in 2022 through Hurricane Ian.
From the sky to the screen, hurricane forecasting starts 10,000 feet in the air. Nick Underwood is an aerospace engineer with the NOAA Hurricane Hunters.
Can depressurize the aircraft, open up the free fall chute, and drop things out that way.
From the highly trained pilots, engineers, and meteorologists on board, this is an important job not for the faint of heart.
Briefly up to Category 5 strength, we were flying through at 8,000 feet, and it was the most turbulence I've ever experienced in my 8 years of doing this. You have so much faith in the people sitting up front. Everybody on board is doing their absolute best. They're highly trained to make sure that we're collecting data safely and that we're doing it effectively.
I had the chance to take a tour inside one of the Hurricane Hunter aircrafts where data is collected that significantly improves hurricane forecasting.
Actually getting into the storm and collecting data is so valuable to the National Hurricane Center. Actually measuring the temperature, the pressure, the winds, the ocean swells, all of that data gets fed into the forecast models that the Hurricane Center makes and allows them to improve their forecast of the hurricane's track and the hurricane's intensity.
The National Hurricane Center uses the data collected by this very recon aircraft to help create a forecast up to 5 days out, which you likely know as the cone of uncertainty.
So this is a GPS drop sonde. Think of this like a weather balloon but backwards. So instead of floating up through the atmosphere, we drop these from the bottom of the aircraft. They have a parachute that deploys, and as they're falling down, they're collecting temperature, pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction data. And then a radio transmitter inside sends all of that back to the aircraft in real time, and then we send it off to the National Hurricane Center. We've been dropping a lot of new instrumentation that allows us to sample the hurricane environment even more, and that includes ocean wave drifters and small aerial drones. And so we'll drop those from the aircraft, and they're able to get down to a lot lower altitude than we safely can and collect data that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get.
And here at Storm Team 2, the data they collect goes directly into the forecast. This, along with our experience and local knowledge, gives you the in-depth and down-to-the-street level information you need to know.
And along with the Hurricane Hunters, the National Hurricane Center, your local National Weather Service office, and right here at Storm Team 2, we are ready to keep you prepared for the 2024 hurricane season.
Back to basics, preparing your home. Remember, tie down any lawn furniture or even bring it in the garage. Also, don't forget about the garbage cans, recycling bins. Those need to either come inside or be tied down as well. We don't need flying missiles and wind going through neighborhoods. Another thing to keep in mind too, make sure if you have a generator, you've got plenty of fuel for that to last at least a few days. And make sure if you do have a generator, you're running that outside. Those don't need to be in garages or inside the house. The other thing too, is something a lot of folks forget about, clean out those gutters. So with heavy rain from tropical systems, you don't want to add additional water onto your property.
Up next, back to basics. Everything you need to know for the 2024 hurricane season.
All signs point to the 2024 season being a hyperactive one. With near record warm water temperatures in the Atlantic, along with developing La Nina, we're expecting an increased number of storms, and some of those could be a problem.
Absolutely, and that's why Storm Team 2 is ramping up preparations to ensure that you, your family, and your friends are ready in case the low country is threatened this season. We are committed to keeping our community safe and informed throughout the season ahead.
We are tracking every development in the Atlantic this season to guarantee you, our community, are equipped with the latest up-to-date information needed in the face of adversity.
That's all the time we have on this year's News 2 Hurricane Special Back to Basics. Thanks for joining us over this past half hour as we gear up for what might be a challenging hurricane season. Remember, you can count on Storm Team 2 to guide you through every step of the way. Together, we can weather any storm.